Hello guys and welcome to Supreme Ruler 2030. Today I want to go over a update to an old feature, let's call it, and then a brand new one on top of it. Both of these are pretty small changes, but pretty big, and I have some opinions to share about it and some thoughts I'd like to hear from you guys. And so bringing it up immediately, that would be right here. The supply chain. Now, this is touted by the developers as being a new thing that they really like, and I think it's really useful. It's not technically new to this game, if you ask me, because Galactic Ruler has basically the same thing. It's very useful over there. It's especially more useful, I would say, because there's less resources to keep track of. There's a lot of information here in 2030 compared to Galactic Ruler, which can make it more useful or more difficult to interact with depending on how you look at it. The supply chain is something you open down here at the bottom right currently by interacting with the supply chain button. Opens up this menu. You can then select what you wish to look at by clicking it over here, or you can just click over here and it will open it up in the supply chain window. Something weird I just noticed is that while the left side synchronizes with the right side does not synchronize with the left. That is a little inconsistent. And, well, if you ask me personally, having this over here is inconvenient as opposed to having it over here with everything else. And this isn't just me being picky, it's because this was in SRU in some way and it got moved over here. I will swap to SRU, which I have launched at the same time, to show you. So now we're over in SRU over here. We have petroleum selected like we had it in Supreme Ruler 2030. And if you see here, we have the materials screen, and this looks a heck of a lot like what we were just looking at. You can see everything that consumes this resource just as we could see it over in Supreme Ruler 2030. It also showed in Supreme Ruler 2030 how much we were generating, but we have that information over here anyway in one convenient little pullout. We have everything that we now need to take up an entire another screen and gigantic chunk of the UI to communicate in 2030. That's why I feel like this system is actually more convenient. The new one is a little bit more in depth than what we see here. If we go to electric power, we can see consumption, raw materials. If you ask me, I actually prefer this, and I'm really interested to see what you guys think, because I know my opinion about this is very different than the developers' opinions. But I prefer what we have here, not just because it takes up like half of the screen real estate and is far more just space efficient, but in my opinion, it's also organized a lot better. We have the exact thing that is consuming the resource under consumption, clearly labeled, and the amount, nice big text, easy to tell. We're looking at electricity. Consumer goods is consuming this much. Industry goods consuming this much. Go all the way down. The civilians are consuming this much. Even how we create it, raw materials. We are using this much petroleum. We are using this much coal, this much uranium. This is what we are consuming, if we're consuming anything depending on the facility, to create this resource. And it's all right here, right in this one convenient place. Now let's hop over to 2030 again. Now we're back on 2030, and you can see the big difference of how this is communicated. We have this same window over here, and we don't have the option to look at it over here. Everything's a little more squished down. This will always be pulled out as if we were looking at that screen we were just looking at, but it's not giving me any information I want because I don't care to look at anything over here, and I can't close this panel without taking advantage of, I don't know if I want to say a bug, but a trick that I know of that just is not relevant and no one's going to use it generally. So we have all this wasted space over here because now we're looking to the right and we have similar information communicated here. So let's go look at electricity like we were just doing. And as you see, we have the same exact information, but is it just me or does it look a lot more like a spreadsheet, right? This is a lot harder to read, don't you think? It's not organized. We don't have one section for consumption. We don't have one section for what we're using to create it. No, we just have the number by itself. So it's actually inverted. And then we have where that number of what resource is coming from and what it's going into. So rather than just having it nicely categorized so we can quickly look at with a glance what raw materials is it consuming and then where is all the stuff going, we have to look a little more carefully now. Because if I'm looking at oil, for example, I could be very well inclined to think that this is just a list of telling me what it is being spent on, and that's it. But then when I look at something like electric power, it changes. Now the first thing is actually showing me that this much oil is being transferred from petrol to become electricity, and then coal, and then the amount of electricity that's being produced in total. And then we can see where the stock is going, what's being traded to the world market, what's going to the population, and then what all the goods is going to. But I need to look from over here on the left to see the number. Then I have to look past this to the right to see where it's going. And this is just kind of in the middle information that is very important for context of what you're actually looking at. Now, while I do think this is useful, I do just think it's poorly organized, because now I have to look really, really closely when I look at this information. I have to look very closely to see exactly how much of exactly what is going where. Is this the resource that I clicked on? Like in SRU, it's always the resource that you've clicked on. Otherwise, it's in a separate category. Or is this a raw material transfer that I need to be paying closer attention to? What do you guys think about this? Do you think that's better or worse? And then just, of course, the inconsistency of syncing up between left and right, and also the fact that we're now taking up more space on the screen, because now if I want to look at this information, I can't just come over to the trade area where that information would be relevant. I need to break my neck, go over to the right side. I need to specifically open supply chain, which is this tiny little box, which I have never once met a new player to Supreme Ruler 2030 who knew what any of these were or what they would be. Every person that I've watched play this, get into this, or got into this that has tried this has not been able to digest these buttons here and not been able to memorize them. Everything over here is essentially a lost button based on what I have observed. I've learned it, but everyone I've watched and seen play it has treated these buttons like a lost button, like the resource statistics. This used to be over here as well. It is now a lost button. I never see anyone interact with this. Everyone I know just clicks around looking for the thing they're looking for, and they miss it because they don't know what they're looking at. Even the overlays have become harder to find, because this used to just be overlays over here, and now it's this. So personally, I think the supply chain should be back over here. I also think that the resources should be back over here. I think personally that everything that is related in such a crucial way should be in the same spot. I think all the trade things should be over on the left where they belong. Heck, they just recently moved the facility controls over to the left where you would be looking at anyway. So that's like a very important thing that I no longer need to break my neck to go look at. And that's amazing. And I might make a separate video on that. But the thing is, this is a design choice, right? And the effects of it are still very much felt with the addition of this supply chain situation and how it's changed from SRU. But that's not all I wanted to show you. Now that I've talked about how I feel about that and shown you what it is and what they've changed it to, and hopefully you guys have already started typing your comments down below about what you think about it, because I want to see if I'm alone on this, or if the devs are alone on this, or if we have some sort of like healthy split down the middle of preferences, where some prefer the spreadsheet look without any organization, or if some prefer the more simplistic look from SRU that is fully organized but less spreadsheety. Because I know some people like spreadsheets. As an avid once player of EVE Online, I can relate. But I'm trying to think about this also from the perspective of your average player. There's a new button here in the supply chain, and this is a great button. This is an amazing button that we didn't have in SRU. But it's also a little inconvenient because, again, it's hidden in the supply chain, which is now this array of extra menus at the bottom right, instead of being on the left with the resources exactly where you would want to manage this kind of stuff in particular. In fact, I think it should be in industry controls, if you ask me, because this is an industry control. The resource allocation button basically makes it so that, let's say we take electricity. Electricity, as we can see in the supply chain, I'm breaking my neck looking from one side of the screen to the other. As we can see in the supply chain, electricity goes into a lot of different things. It can go into creating rubber, consumer goods, industry goods, military goods, and sometimes you're at war and you don't have enough of something, especially electricity, which doesn't stockpile and needs to be maintained in production from day to day. If you run out, that's a problem. And so maybe you want to control where a good is going to so that you don't run out. Well, let's say I'm at war. I don't necessarily care if my civilians are getting enough electricity. They can be unhappy. We're at war. We have to make sacrifices at war, all right? In real life, the Ukraine war is going on. I live in America. I'm not even at war. Gas is doubled. Food is quintupled. I don't even know what that means, but it's up there. I can't afford to live. Can you? So maybe I want the civilians to go through what I'm going through. So I would lower this bar. So now what we're basically saying is, based on the amount of available electricity, I am aiming to lower the priority of civilians. To be honest, with the way the sliders work currently, I don't actually know what these percentages are communicating. What I do know, lower means they get less, higher means they get more. Unfortunately, in the current state, and now here's something I hope to express that hopefully they change, and hopefully we get your thoughts as well. Leave them in the comments below, because they're looking for feedback. They are, and we want to get this feedback in before the game releases. What I wish you could do, well, for one, I wish all of this was adding up to a value of 100%. That would make so much more sense and be so much more easy to communicate. I wish that the center of the bar, because you can double click any bar in this game to get to the center, was not an arbitrary 148%, 150%, 150. I've seen it go to 152 before. It just makes, right there. I wish it was not like that. I wish I could adjust all three of these independently instead of only one at a time, because the moment I start moving another one, the others synchronize. And so, for example, I wish the middle of the bar, 100, 100, 100, was actually like a third each, but it was like labeled that way instead of at 100% each. And then I wish I could, for example, right click one of these bars to lock it. So let's say I want military to constantly be getting a third of the total produced electricity, but I want it to boost up what the industry got and lower civilian only, while leaving military at that consistent amount. Then I could just lock this and then raise industry, and it would lower civilian. This is a very common thing in other strategy games that I have played that have a allocation slider like this. In fact, it's in almost every single other game that I've played with a system like this, and I believe it would be very useful. I have spoken to Chris about this once, and he thought that that would make it difficult because he believes that additional inputs are hard for players to remember and hard to teach. But you guys tell me, would you prefer the way I said it, or do you prefer the simplicity of this? I am definitely a more advanced player compared to most, so I would prefer the ability to lock and slide independently so I can accurately control every single part of resource allocation. However, some may prefer that this system is the way it is, where you adjust one, prioritize only one, and the rest move to compensate. Let me know what you guys prefer in the comments. Again, we need to have this conversation so the devs can see your feedback so everyone knows what makes everybody happiest, right? But this is a new feature that really goes hand in hand with the supply chain, so I wanted to cover kind of like both of these and my thoughts at the same time in the same video. I believe both of these are good additions, quote unquote. I have only some qualms about the placement and lack of synchronization of the supply chain screen, and I believe that this now very useful addition to the game, the resource allocation sliders here, could be made even better. And so I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts, and so we can pack them up and ship them off to the devs and get a better game on release. But that is all we have time for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little look over these newer additions to the Supreme Ruler series. More and more improvements. I keep making videos, but they've added features at a rate where I have not been keeping up with going over all the new features and providing my feedback on them. But I hope you've been enjoying these videos. I plan on making way more Supreme Ruler 2030 videos. If you have any topics, anything you'd like me to show off on Supreme Ruler 2030, feel free to leave that in a comment below as well. For now though, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.